Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you, and welcome, and thank you for joining me tonight. For the past, I don't know, 8 or 9 weeks, on a Wednesday evening at this time, I have taught Winning with the Word Bible study, and I have gone through. Felt we're on the book of Romans, right? We're going through the book of Romans and just working our way through that. Tonight is not Bible study. Okay, tonight is not Bible study. I'm going to take this opportunity tonight to talk about what we've all witnessed and my own struggle with a response to this very public and destructive brutality, the murder of George Floyd. So I'm deeply troubled, but I am not without hope. And I've never done a YouTube live before. I've only done, I think, one or two Facebook lives before. This is something that is very new to me in terms of using this forum to address something that I think is really, really important. So I'm going to ask for your patience, and if you want to comment and share thoughts as we go through, that's fine too, because then we can make this interactive. I've thought long and hard about what I would say tonight, and really went back and forth as to whether or not I was even going to use this forum to address it, because I think that when you say something that can seem political and you're a faith leader, and that's what I am. I'm not a politician. I lead people. I'm a ministry leader. And I think that anything that you say can seriously be misconstrued and misinterpreted and even misrepresented. And I hope that that doesn't happen tonight. Today, a statement went out from our church, which was a direct response to the murder of George Floyd. And I thank my colleagues on the NEC who were in support of that statement going out. And it just gave us an opportunity not to let this moment go by without a response. I think there's a very big difference between reacting and responding. There's a lot of reaction going on, absolutely, and quite rightly. But I think through the statement, we have tried to respond in a measured way to signal to everyone that even though we are worshipers and intercessors, that we will not allow this situation to go unnoticed. I also want to give a shout out to my good friend and brother, Bishop John Francis, who, and I'm not name dropping, Bishop Francis is my brother and a dear friend. And I watched with great enthusiasm his Instagram post, and we communicated. In fact, we spoke, and a lot of what Bishop John said is what was exactly in my heart. So as I was listening to him, it was in some ways listening to the thoughts. He gave voice to the thoughts that I was thinking. And so some of what I'm going to say is a direct result of that conversation and his conversation through Instagram, because I think that our experiences are similar in that we are the children of those persons who came here in the late 60s, late 50s and early 60s. And so we grew up in an era and understood racism in a very sheltered way. But nonetheless, we were impacted by it. And what I recognize, in having now 3 adult children and having talked with them, their response is so very different than than mine is. Equally as upsetting, but and I hope that I'm not painting, and I hope my children will feel offended in any way by what I'm about to say, but I sense a militant core that they are exhibiting. And so I just want to share some thoughts. And again, I invite you, to comment and let me know what your thoughts are. And we might be able even to engage in some type of dialogue about this. So I'm going to talk about racism tonight. That's what I'm going to talk about. And because I firmly believe that what we saw in Minneapolis, Minnesota, was something so heinous. And the question that I've been asking myself is, we're grateful that the cameras were there, but what if the camera wasn't there? No, if the camera was not there to record what took place, would anybody get arrested? Would anybody have even been held to account? If the camera wasn't there, would anybody be even talking about it? And even if there was any kind of infraction of someone's human rights and liberties, the system is so structured that information could have been doctored and evidence tampered with to the extent that nobody would have been any the wiser. So we're grateful for the camera being there so that we can engage in a conversation. And as a Black man, understanding and having lived in America for many, many years, and I'm really privileged in that I have two homes. Absolutely, America has been my home. In fact, I've lived in America many more years than I've lived here in the United Kingdom. And when I woke up the other morning and saw the violence at the White House and the rioting and so forth, or the demonstration, let me not even call it a riot, but the demonstration at the White House, it really came home to me even more forcibly, because I used to live about 20, on a good day, I could get you from my house to the White House in about 20, 25 minutes. So it was very close to home. Of course, I have children that live there. I have my brother, I have my sisters that are there. So I have family and very, very dear friends who live in the States, and have communicated with them since this. But it's very painful. But our focus is not what's going on across the ocean, but what's happening right here in the United Kingdom. What are the challenges that we're facing as people of color in everyday situations? I thought about an illustration, and I was sharing this yesterday, that here I am at my house, and if the door were to knock, and I went to the door and opened the door, and there was a police officer, I would immediately go into a mode of absolute compliance. Yes, sir. How can I help you? I would be very cooperative. But if my son went to the door, it might be a different situation, because the generation that's coming behind us are, as I said before, they're more militant, and they are more maybe progressive in their thinking as it relates to this subject, and feel very strongly that they don't have to take what we have taken in the way that we had to take it. And so therein lies a part of this challenge of when there is a intersection between members of the Black community and police, there is this tension, that I probably wouldn't have been involved in, and others in my age group. So we're going to talk about racism for a little bit. And racism in all of its form is evil. It's an evil, And when Jesus teaches us how to pray, he says to us that we should pray and ask the Lord to deliver us from evil. And so one of the takeaways that I want to sort of embed in this conversation today, this evening, is that racism is evil in all of its form. And at the very root of racism is, and I'm not an expert, I'm not an expert. So these are observations that I'm making tonight. At the very root of it is this idea that one group is superior to another. That one group is superior to another. So if I can read this is I wrote this, that racism at its core is a personal and social disorder rooted in the assumption that one race is superior to another. All right. So it is this platform of superiority. That somehow, because I am of a particular race, that gives me a particular sense of privilege over another group of people. Yes. And there are different types of racism, right? And I've sort of consulted with people who are far more adept and far more versed in this subject, and it has left me at a deficit, because I now believe I have to do more work to educate myself, not just from an anecdotal point of view. And by that I mean, yes, I know racism exists, and I'm a Black man, and so I know that there are groups of people that don't like Black people, and yes, if I'm driving, the police can pull me over. So that's anecdotal. So I have an anecdotal, albeit real, experience of racism, but I need to educate myself on the science of it and the psychology of racism, in terms of what racism does at its core, what racism accomplishes, and who benefits from it. And if there's a group that benefits from it, then obviously there's a group that doesn't benefit from it. And so there are different types of racism, and so the first one that is familiar to many of us in terms of the word is institutionalized racism. Yes, institutionalized racism. So that type of racism, it exists where systems and institutions are created and maintained in such a way that they provide privilege or prejudice for one race over another. Yes. So institutional racism this is how I'm going to define it, in terms of us getting jobs, us receiving loans, on a number of platforms. So they let you in, but they don't let you up. They let you in, but they don't let you up. So even though it appears that there is a welcoming, the system and the structure is so polluted and so viciously geared against a group of people, that now we get excited, when we get that job, or we get excited when they let us into that neighborhood, or we get excited. And sometimes we will even tell, I'm the first Black to do this, and I'm the first. They let you in, but they don't let you up. Okay, so, and even when they let you in, you have to transform yourself into something, oftentimes, that you are not, in order to stay in. And in a conversation that I had with my son, I recognized that that's about survival. So there are many Black people who deal with racism on a day-to-day basis on their jobs, or they deal with racism and they deal with it by not dealing with it, by either ignoring it or they just ignore it. And it has become such a part of their norms that they know that their supervisor is exhibiting racist behavior. They know that their colleagues are. But this is how I'm feeding my family. This is how I'm going to pay the mortgage. This is how. And so they deal with it in a way as to suggest that that we conform. Yes. But I'm not, that is in no way a criticism, because in order that conforming means, that I can feed my family. And so a person makes a decision that I know the system is corrupt. I know that racism exists, but I'm going to conform to the norms that have been placed. And because any reaction or any confrontation is met by, or you're playing the race card, or you have a chip on your shoulder. Malcolm said, it's not that I have a chip on my shoulder. That chip on my shoulder is your foot on my neck. Yes, that was one of the quotes from Malcolm X. And but there's another kind of racism that, again, that so there's the institutionalized racism. Then there is what those who work in the field describe as internalized racism. Now, my brothers and sisters, this is the deep one. Now, institutionalized racism is deep, but the internalized racism, this is where we begin to agree with and buy into and conform to the opinion of those who are oppressing us. And here is why internalized racism is so insidious, is that we then play out those issues within ourselves. So then it leads us into a form of self-hatred. So I hate what I am. And because I hate what I have become, or it has become so internalized, the negativity that I've heard about myself, I begin to treat you, because you look like me, I treat you sometimes worse than they treat me. Yes. And that is the insidious nature of internalized racism. Now, Bishop Francis verbalized this so well. We've made a lot of accomplishments in this country, and he said, when our parents came here in the late 50s, literally signs, no coloureds, no dogs, no Irish, or whatever way it was, no Irish, no dogs, no coloured, no. But whatever it was that was blatant. And so we've made a lot of accomplishments, and those accomplishments did not come as a result of the benevolence of the host nation. People had to fight for that, and people had to riot, and we see what's going on in the States right now. But for those of you that are in my age group, okay, all right, we remember the Brixton riots. We remember the Handsworth riots. I live in Bristol. I remember April 1980, the St. Paul riots, and where it was so, cities were burning. Bristol was St. Paul's, and if those of you that know about Bristol, St. Paul's was on fire. And so this is not something. Now, this is what I'm trying to get us here in the United Kingdom. Now, I know we're looking on the CNN, and we're looking on BBC, and we're seeing what's going on over in the United States, but we must now look at us and look at what's going on in this country. And I am so thankful, and I'm really appreciative for our young people and our young adults who are who are really the ones that are championing this. And I congratulate those who marched today in London, and from all the reports that have come that I've heard and seen, it has been peaceful. And because people recognize that while we are getting excited about what's going on overseas, we've got some issues here that we must deal with. And when I say we must deal with them, we must deal with them. And my challenge is, as a faith leader, my challenge is, how do we, because we're not political leaders, but as a pastor, as a leader of people, how do we, the church, what is our role and responsibility? And before somebody says, well, Bishop, we can pray, I understand that. And we are a praying people, and we must pray and we must fast. But my Bible tells me that faith without works is dead. You see, I don't know how any preacher can get into a pulpit for the next whenever and just preach and not acknowledge what's going on. And I don't know how we can sing and we can go through all of the emotions of worship and yet not acknowledge what's happening. It would be, it would be, I don't know what my words are failing me tonight, but I personally have made a decision that I cannot just, because it's Wednesday evening, and Wednesday evening at 7:30, I teach Winning with the Word Bible study. So I'm just going to get on and continue teaching about Romans, and I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ, et cetera, and not acknowledge that, not acknowledge the evil of racism. And there are, it is, I don't know how a man or a woman who can have testified of being in a relationship with Jesus Christ and remain a racist. I don't understand that, so and I guess why I'm not flowing as I usually, because I'm being very careful about what I say, because I know that whatever I say is going to stay on this platform for a long time. So I'm going to, but I could not just come on tonight and teach a Bible study, and I cannot just preach on Sunday. And we have been praying all week, and our theme this week has been faith under pressure. And I don't know about you, but I feel the pressure. I feel the pressure. I feel it. And I'm going to. There will be a march here in Bristol on Sunday, and I fully intend to be there. I fully intend to go. I will have my mask on. I will have my arms out. I will go with my son, because if I can just go and just stand and let because I cannot just not say anything. And yesterday, it was Blackout Tuesday, I understand. And now, let's really understand that. We were putting up the black, and I put it up. But let's understand that. And now let me get into something a little controversial. And Bishop Francis talked about the economic power that we have. We have economic power. So we as a community can make a decision that we are not going to purchase, or we're not going to economically support a particular thing, a particular business. But then what we must do, my brothers and sisters, we must then take the money that we don't use over there and use it within our community. Now, here's the challenge. Now, and this has always been the challenge. for that one brother that has one sister, and I know we had someone in our church who owned a little a shop, grocery store in our community for years. All right, and people would go there, and sometimes the prices that they would have to, they were more than what you would get at some of the main line, and we would criticize that one shop owner because his bag of rice is 4 pounds more than the bag of rice that you can buy at Tesco's. All right. But understand that his buying power, the reason why Tesco's can sell you that bag of rice for that little amount, because they're buying 100,000 bags of rice. But that one brother or sister who's trying to keep that little corner shop open so we can get our West Indian delicacies can't buy 100,000 bags of rice. He can only buy 50 bags of rice and can only pass on that to his customers. But we would complain, we're not going back there because he's doing. Now, what we have to understand, we cannot just stop from supporting it. We've got to support our own. We've got to support our own. And there are people, that have great vision and have, and we've got to support our own, and we've got to educate ourselves, and we have to not just react, but we must respond. And I guess what I'm searching for is how do we, because now we can talk about Jesus. We can talk about Jesus. You can talk about Jesus all you want to. But when Jesus saw hungry people, he fed them. When Jesus saw people getting ready to be murdered, he intervened. Jesus then didn't step back. He didn't just step back and say, well, you all kill the woman. When Jesus saw people who were, because remember now, during times of Jesus, racism existed. Now it was apartheid. The Jews had no that's racism. Jews had no dealings with the Samaritans. Jews and the Gentiles didn't mix. Black and white didn't mix. Jesus now is inserted into that situation. And Jesus has to minister in that situation to people who are oppressed. People who are oppressed. So when Jesus is on the Mount of Beatitudes and he's teaching, blessed are the poor, for he was not just talking about poor in spirit. He was talking about those that were oppressed economically. All right. And so we can't react, and we're not going to react violently, and we're not going to react, but we must respond. Because I firmly believe that just like any other news cycle, in a couple of weeks, the news cycle is going to change to something else. It's going to change to something else. And our minds will so we have to respond. Pastors, we've got to find a way to respond. Not just react. They killed a black man. They've been killing black men in the street for years. Here is the difference. The difference is now we see it on our televisions. So what we saw that's not new. That's not new. And it has happened even in this very own country. And so I am, I'm not upset. I'm not upset. Yes, I was. I was disturbed. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. That man knelt on the brother's neck. But I'm not upset anymore, but I'm troubled. I'm now gone from upset to troubled. And the troubling is, now, Brother Edmund, how do we respond, not react? So the difference between a reaction and a response is a response now, it has to develop a strategy. How do we engage? You see, how do we engage? And I'm going to say something. This is probably the most controversial thing I'm going to say. I love coming together and the fellowship, and we can form an apostolic choir, and we can have a joint apostolic fellowship service. But I'm already going to a many service. I don't need to go to another fellowship service. Now, if you invite me, I'm going to come. What I'm looking for us now as a group of people is, how are we going to respond? And if there is a political response to this, then we have to develop a political response to this. If there's an economic response to this, then we have to develop an economic response to this. So when we talk about the body of Christ coming together, I have no problem with the body of Christ coming together. And those of us have like faith. Some of us are going to have to march. I'm going on Sunday. No, Bishop, what are you going to do? I'm going to stand there. I'm going to stand there. Because this calls for a response. And I'm really what's the word? I'm just scrolling through because there's a couple of quotes. Martin Luther King, tremendous civil rights leader in the United States. He won the Nobel Peace Prize. But listen to what he says. Listen to what he says. He said this. Now, let me just read a couple of the quotes. He said, a riot, this is King now, a riot is the language of the unheard. That's why people riot. Now, I understand that there are some unsavory things that happen when people riot. And now the looting and the theft and the destruction of people's property, that has no place in political demonstration. And the fight, in fact, that defeats, because the focus now becomes that and not the issue. So the violence overshadows the issue. Okay. But King said, a riot is the language of the unheard. Amen. Sometimes I wish I thought about that. A riot is the language of the unheard. Then he also said this. He said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. But this is the quote that stirred me, my brothers and sisters. This is the quote that made me want to come on tonight. This is what he said. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Let me say that again. King said, in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, because your enemy, they're going to talk. They're going to talk. What King is saying, that's not what his concern is. His concern is that his friends were silent. And so we cannot be silent. We cannot be silent preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ, because it is the power of God unto salvation. But we cannot exist in a vacuum and go to our churches when we go back to our churches and go into those four walls and not realize that there are people who are disenfranchised, people who are excluded, people who are marginalized. And we cannot ignore it, because some of us, we are dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. Now, it's a lot more subtle than it was, because years ago, when our parents came here, They would not even let them in. Now we have come, remember what our parents said, the reason why I want you to go to university is because I never got a chance to go. So they made sure education was key for them. You must get educated. Why? Because they did not have the luxury. So they made sure that we were educated. So now what they have done, they did not let our parents in, but they have let us in. But they're not letting us up. So we're in, and we get excited that we're in. And the other thing that we've got to do, brothers and sisters, is when we get in, we've got to leave the door open for others to come in. Sometimes we get in and then we shut the door behind us. We don't want anybody. In fact, some of us don't mind being the only one in the room. We don't mind being. So what we do when we get into these positions of privilege and positions, we close the door behind us. And I understand sometimes it's about survival. We assimilate. But now it's time to speak up. The brother was trying to speak up, and what he said was, I can't breathe. Yeah, I can't breathe. Now, anybody with some humanity, you're handcuffed. There is 4 of you. There's just 1 of me. And I'm handcuffed on the floor. And I say to you, I can't breathe. 8 minutes and 46 seconds. Now I'm getting ready to close. I'm getting ready to close. There's got to be some action. We just cannot deal with this. And then, so we have to educate ourselves. We've got to get the information. We've got to talk about racism. We've got to have a conversation. I have many dear friends that are white. I have colleagues. One of the colleagues here, he's a white pastor in this city. I love him like a brother, and he loves me like a brother. We have white brothers and sisters as part of our congregations, and I don't want you to think that because Bishop Edmund is pro-black that I'm anti-white. No, I love everybody, regardless of the skin color. I love everybody. I love everybody. But what you have to understand, my brothers and sisters, is that the pain that we feel. I know someone said, well, Bishop, I feel the pain. I get it. You know, I have this analogy. It might work, it might not work, but I'm going to say it. With my wife, we have 3 children, and I was present at the birth of my 3 children. I held my wife's hand and coached her and did all the things that I'm supposed to do. And my wife, some big babies. And my wife pushed out those babies. Now hear me to her. See, Yolanda, I know what you went through having those babies. Now, she has every right to look at me and say, no, you don't. No, you don't. You were there. You were present. But you didn't feel the pain like I felt the pain. So when we, as people of color, cry and we make a loud noise, I don't want anybody to tell me I'm playing the race card. I don't want anybody to tell me that I have a chip on my shoulder. I don't want anybody to tell me, oh, get over that. Because you don't know the pain. Now, you know, I've tried to not only formally education, I've tried to educate myself. And I walk into a store sometimes. Can you all pray for me? Because, and I have something in my hand, and I go to the counter, and there are times I'm not even acknowledged. Now you see why that's such a problem for me, because from we was little children, our parents trained us. When you walk in a room, you don't just walk in a room and sit down. You walk in a room and you greet everybody in there. And sometimes a person would be on the phone. It's not even, oh, sir, I'll be with you in a moment. It is as if you're not there. The other challenge is that sometimes you walk into the store, and you're treated like you're the only one in there because the security guy is looking at you, and at times when enough is enough. And so I'm calling on all of us. We've seen it, we've reacted, we have, but we just can't post a letter on social media. We can't just put a blackout symbol on our feed. We must come up with a response. And part of that response, as people of faith, is prayer, yes, is intercession without a doubt. But some of us are going to have to march. And that's what I intend to do. So if you see my face on TV, some of us are going to have to march. Some of us are going to have to march. And some of us, and we're going to have to vote, and we're going to have to learn who's running for office, and we're going to have to hold them to account. And not just voting in the national elections when we're voting for who the prime minister is going to be. We need to vote locally for your council person. All politics is local. So whether it's county, whether it's city, that's where we've got to. And then some of us who are called, who feel and have that assignment to serve in the marketplace and the political arena, then you will have to accept the call of God to do that, as others have. And so, my brothers and sisters, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you for joining me. This was not Bible study. This was a conversation. This was, I guess, a monologue. And I see many of you responding, and I appreciate that. We're going to pray for each other and pray that the Lord will help us not to react in negative ways, but that we, through a careful and strategic response to everything, that we will ensure that we move forward and as a people, because I share with my son, and I thank God for my sons and my daughter who give me a great perspective of the millennial perspective. And I think the millennial perspective is important. But in a conversation that we were having, I said to him that when we were in the 60s, the anthem of the civil rights movement was "We Shall Overcome." And I'm scrolling through social media today, and we're still singing "We Shall Overcome." Remember, they have let us in, but for so many of us, they have not let us up. And so the progress that we need to make is in our hands and in the hands of the Lord who's going to help us. God bless you tonight. We're going to pray for one another and continue to pray for each other and ask the Lord to watch over us, whatever way that we can participate. Like I said, I've also been invited to be part of some type of interview on the radio on Sunday, and I seized that opportunity when they called me today. I said, absolutely, 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 taking this opportunity tonight and whatever we can do in order to help. And so, be blessed, everyone. We're going to lift up our heads. We're going to lift up our heads, and this week our theme on our prayer call is faith under pressure. We're not losing our faith. No, sir, we're not losing our faith, but our faith is under pressure. And we will walk the walk and be blessed. Have a great night, everyone. God bless you.